The world of underwater photography presents an entirely new set of challenges, even for the experienced photographer. As underwater photographer Bob Holland says, anyone attempting this type of photography should be aware of all the potential problems.
Certainly making that transition from shooting on land to shooting underwater is easier if you're a knowledgeable diver. And certainly that should be the first thing you do before you try to take any pictures underwater, unless maybe you're snorkeling. Because the environment is somewhat of a hostile one until you understand it. The water moves, the creatures are new and different, there are physiological limitations. You can only stay at certain depths for a certain amount of times, your air is limited, you make one entry point from a boat, you better end up in the same point. So you're certainly not going to get good photographs until you're very, very comfortable in the water. And that takes a little time. So you want to develop the ability of diving before you develop, taking pictures while you're diving. And that's something that has to be understood. And it'll be an obvious result in your pictures, and you'll see that as you become a better diver, you'll become a better underwater photographer. The two definitely go hand in hand.
The underwater environment requires specialized tools for the photographer. The equipment must be watertight, and the photographer must have easy access to all the controls on the camera. There are several methods of approaching this problem.
I always advise them to define their needs. A lot of people read ads, and they see big, expensive cameras in exotic locations, and they say, well, that must be underwater photography. And certainly for some people it is, but not everyone. There are all levels of any kind of endeavor or hobby. Certainly photography is the same situation. There is an important distinction between underwater cameras. Most people tend to think that a camera used underwater is a submersible camera with waterproof seals called O-rings and so forth. And that's true, and they're small and they're handy to use. But an even more common type is a housing to go around a standard SLR camera. And it seems like an obvious choice for a lot of people if you already have a camera system. You have a 35mm camera, you have several lenses, you know how to use them. It would be an obvious move to find an enclosure to go around those so you can continue doing what you already know how to do, focus through the lens, adjust your own aperture, shutter speed, and etc., and pick the lens for the subject you want. And that's a very possible thing to do underwater. There are many manufacturers that make cameras, housings for almost any camera that someone would own. Photographing marine life underwater is in one sense very difficult and in one sense much easier than photographing wildlife on land. It's more difficult because you must go to a certain place and find those things. You can't just go in your backyard in most cases. You must go to a destination, know where to look and know what to expect. But once you do that, the literal proliferation of colors and marine life is fantastic. And the things you can photograph in an afternoon will amaze most people. I've never had as much luck in a jungle or a rainforest or a woods as I've had on a reef. There's just no comparison of subject matter. It's far superior underwater. But getting the understanding to be able to get those good results takes a bit more time. Getting good underwater pictures is usually not a case of just pointing and shooting a picture. Good photographers, professional or amateur, tend to make a picture, putting some forethought into it. Underwater, that's absolutely vital because it's more difficult to communicate. Your time there is limited. Your air source is limited. You want to do the most you can in a minimum of time. And sometimes that means setting up a picture that might otherwise be taken as a snapshot on land. You just don't have time to make snapshots underwater. You must think those out. Jan, let's use the standard direction movement, pointing towards something, a fish, a coral, and this towards the mask, look. So if we do this and point towards something, that means look at that subject, all right? Bob, as far as the fish feeding goes, stay back to the right and over. Drop food down in little pieces to draw them in. If you spot a specific species that's colorful, let me know. We'll try to move the set over towards it. And both of you keep in mind, we're going to work very, very tight because the visibility is 15 to 20 feet. Green water, a lot of plankton in it. We're going to move nice and close, okay? Yeah, I'll take the two cameras and there's one flash on the floor. And you can follow me in. Is it clear? In addition to becoming accustomed to this new environment you're photographing in, you also have to realize how that environment is going to affect your photography. And one of the primary things you have to realize is that your depth of field and depth of view is quite limited. On land, you can see quite a ways. Underwater, that may not or may not be the case. In tropical areas, you might see well over 100 feet. In a northern lake, much less. There's still great kinds of photography you can do in almost no visibility, but you just have to understand the limitations. Something else you have to get used to doing underwater is staying very close to your subject. Certainly if you're taking micro or macro pictures, you are very close in the first place. But even with wide angle, you must stay very close. Panoramics are not possible. You just cannot see the whole marine environment. And there's much too much particulate matter between you and the subject if you try to capture a whole reef. It doesn't work. So you must stay very close. Preferably use the widest angle lens possible, or the widest angle lens you can afford in your camera to get close to the subject. Minimize the amount of water between you and the subject, minimize the amount of material in the water, minimize the amount of light fall off from your flash, or even from the light that's bouncing from this subject, from the sun to your lens. You must stay close to keep relatively sharp pictures and make the situation workable to your advantage as much as you can. One way to do that is to bait fish in, and it's a very common technique. All you need to know is what kind of food is liked by what kind of fish. Some are meat eaters, others like cheese, and most of them love hot dogs. So you bring a few in your life vest pocket and feed them, or preferably have someone else feed them, and you can get the pictures. So food is very important. Also going to an area that you know a certain species or a certain type of fish or invertebrate or coral lives, and knowing what to expect, bringing the right lens. And that's all kind of thinking out your picture before it happens. And in that same mode of thought, if you know that a certain type of fast-moving fish is in the area, I might preset my lens when I'm moving around from area to area to adjust something in mid-water. If I'm want to capture whatever goes by, I might set it for a distance scale of 5 to 7 or 5 to 10 feet away in an average exposure. So if something just swims out of the blue, I'm totally unprepared for it, I can pick up the camera, take a picture, and have a reasonably good chance of getting a good result. And sometimes that once-in-a-lifetime picture can be attained that way.